My guest today, BK Das, is known as an architect activist. His priority has been to establish a very close relation between architecture and people by involving them in a participatory planning process while critically responding to the cry for sustainable ecology. Due to his efforts in advocating for participatory planning and hearing public voice, he is a senior advisor at Placemaking India platform and Placemaking Network. In this episode, he shared his passion and commitment for his work and his story about how it started and the journey as it goes. Enjoy this episode as we discuss his vision and personal achievements. Assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. I am Asban Sari, the founder of the organization Peacemakers Pakistani, and I am bringing you the stories of placemakers, artists, and professionals from around the globe about how they created an impact and made change happen. You are listening to the Making It Happen show. Thank you for joining in. Enjoy the episode.
Hello.
Oh, hello, sir. Thank you for joining me.
Pleasure, Asba.
How is it going? What was your plan for today other than this meeting? And
Well, it's
how was the last year and what are your plans for this year?
oh God, oh boy. Well, the uncertainty has been so much that it's so hard to plan for the future. The uncertainty, both in many, many different ways. The COVID, of course, has set us all around the world into a very difficult and uncertain future. And it has put us back to think about how we can achieve a better future. Yeah, so it's so hard to plan anything at this point of time.
Okay, so let's start with our question answers. Okay, sir. So you are an architect and you choose to be a placemaker and public space advocate. So why did you do that? Instead of choosing going towards iconic buildings and stuff like that, you chose to be a public space advocate. What made you do that?
Well, it's a very strange question to an architect because I suppose architecture is not just about building design. Architects have a much greater responsibility to social development and the environment and environmental protection and so on and so forth. So it's very obvious that one of our roles, in fact, the most significant role of an architect ought to be what I'm trying to pursue, not just get trapped into, working with a patron and designing a building and drawing fees. That's just one small part of the architectural knowledge and commitment. So, yeah, I suppose it's very natural for an architect to do this, what I'm trying to do. And I'm surprised that many architects don't do that. I'm surprised that many architects, most architects, have sort of limited their own knowledge and role and detached themselves and separated themselves from larger questions of social development and the environment. So, yeah, so therefore I say it's a bit of a strange question to me.
I mean, what attracted you to public spaces more?
I suppose, well, uh, why public spaces attracts me is because it deals with public. It reflects public sentiment, public feelings, relationships, uh, people. Yeah, they attract me. And so obviously public spaces is a reflection of all of those concerns. It's both ways. An effective and good social condition and relationship reflects in the state and condition of a public space, and vice versa. A the state of public spaces in our cities or towns or villages in many ways do reflect the social conditions that prevail. They are a mirror to each other. And so, if I'm interested in people, I'm interested in relationships, I'm interested in politics, I'm interested in democracy, then it is obvious that I am concerned with public spaces, about public spaces. Public spaces are great places where people meet, they socialize, they deliberate politics, they talk about each other, they develop relationships. Social networking is nurtured through interactions in public spaces. So I think, therefore, it's inevitable, it's natural that we all, as architects and planners, turn our minds and attention to the idea of expanding public spaces that are fast shrinking, both in physical and democratic terms, which means that not only our open spaces are being colonized and captured for real estate or business or private interest, but also the democratic space that is available for us to freely meet and dialogue and exchange and share our concerns is also being being shrinking. So it's this shrinking public spaces in a fast developing urbanization that concerns me very much. And so the whole idea is to try and see how we can expand our public spaces.
Thank you so much for playing your role in this area. Okay, so you believe that architecture, as well as large umbrella of town planning, must be charged with the highest democratic ideals because it will be cost efficient, ecological sensitive, static, and deeply rewarding for all stakeholders. Explain that, and how did you come to this conclusion?
Well, it's, as I said, that it's not a conclusion. It's natural that we deal with these issues. Uh, it has to be public spaces have to be democratic. If equality and justice are concerns, that if we have to fight polarization, if we have to challenge polarization, increasing disparity and conflict have to be questioned, then we would have to talk about unification. We would have to talk about unity. And unification of people and places becomes an important means through which larger democratic ideals of equality and justice can be pursued. And therefore, it's sort of these are not divided and separated issues, but they sort of intermingle and intertwine with each other. They're inseparable from one another, as much as people are inseparable from nature and vice versa, that the two are intrinsically or intricately intertwined.
Right. Okay, you say that as cities are expanding, public spaces are shrinking in both physical and democratic terms. How did you realize that? Because this is really a hit point to advocate for public spaces. If you can give some examples, that would be great.
But firstly, let me say that as being an architect or planner, we are not some separate species. We are people as much as everybody else. Just because we've been educated formally through a certain profession of architecture and planning does not take us away from the general spirit and concerns of people. And so if we consider ourselves to be common and people, and as common people, or equal to everybody else, and consider everybody else to be as equal with us, then we would have to shed away these egos that we and the ideas of exclusivity that we sort of learn and develop through our formal educational system, that through education we've achieved some higher level where we cannot relate to the common people. So we have to first shed away these egos and these false sense of gratification, uh, of individuality, of exclusiveness, of exclusivity. And if we have to do that, then we have to talk about inclusiveness. We have to talk about, as I explained earlier, about equality. We have to talk about the democratic spirit in which we do consider social equality and justice to be the primary concern and objective in our struggles towards higher levels of equality and justice. Uh, so I think these questions overlap each other, and so my answers do overlap each other. But I think the main thing that you are asking is that how did I realize that because this is really a hit to advocate for public spaces? Um, well, I think that was your question, right? Um, well, since I'm concerned with these issues, and I came into Mumbai to a city where I witnessed this extreme polarization, how people and places are being continuously being fragmented and separated, how continuously there is this effort by our governments and by the ruling classes to start dividing our cities, and how more and more walls are being built continuously, keeping places and people out of each other. That I witnessed to a very high level in the city of Mumbai, where, as you know, more than 60% people live in extreme conditions in slums, even being denied a basic human rights, let alone civic rights and access to water, education, healthcare, and so on and so forth. I witnessed in this city too how the working class was being denied their basic human rights and right to participate in decisions that affect their own lives. Now, how can people be denied to participate in matters that concerns their own lives? How can our environment in which we live be taken away from us and be dealt with by somebody else, which does not let us breathe fresh air or access clean and safe drinking water or access healthcare and education? These questions were so glaring. The issues of rights and the denial of rights to more and more people as time went by, as the city began to expand and prosper, began to obviously attract my attention, and not just attract my attention, but compelled me to intervene, to bring about change towards equality and towards justice for all. And architecture obviously provided me that enormous opportunity to use it as an effective tool of social change. And I consider architecture, therefore, as being an effective democratic tool of social change. And that's how I have continued with my engagements and endeavor.
Awesome. Yes, this is what I wanted to hear. Your story, your part of story. Okay, so you say placemaking is a powerful tool for democratic change, a means to stitch cities together. Tell me why you say that. I mean, do you think that it can really stitch cities together? And why do you think there's a need for that?
Yeah, I think I just sort of answered this question uh, earlier. In the last question, I sort of almost answered this particular question that you're now raising. As I said, our cities are breaking down continuously. Cities where people and places are being segregated, right? You have areas of extreme poverty to extreme wealth. You have areas of filth to beautification, areas of glamour and beautification. You have these extreme conditions that prevail. And these are issues of concern because heightening social tension and segregation can lead to extreme state of violence and reaction. And it is precisely for this reason, and the reason to avoid violence, the eruption of violence, uh, that we need to unify people and places, that we need to stitch the disparate fragments of the cities together and talk about equality, talk about harnessing democratic values. And therefore, yes, you're right, these increasing fissures in the urban landscape that we witness not just in India and Indian cities, but in many cities across the world, including in developed nations, is of concern to all of us, and more particularly of the secluded and the excluded communities or the marginalized communities, whose numbers are growing by the day.
Yes, indeed. And placemaking movement can connect different democratic rights or struggling all over the world. Indeed. Okay, so you are committed advocate for the idea of public spaces being the foundation of city planning. How has this journey been in this rapidly developing world, and what were your major struggles and lessons?
Yeah, I think the key point that comes from my experience and a learning that I have through my over 30 years of working in the public interest matters is really this question that you just raised of um, city planning. You know, we are taught in schools and colleges, and we practiced into making these very beautiful presentations in exclusive conference rooms with PowerPoints, uh, with very little communication with the people who are going to be affected through and by our planning decisions, right? Uh, Planning has been a very elite and exclusive profession. And if we need to democratize planning, and if we have to democratize city development, and if we have to democratize public spaces, then nothing better than using the idea of public spaces to form the basis of city planning. So it's like a bottom up process. You do not prepare a master plan, quote unquote, master plan, where we often invite specialists and experts from outside, including foreigners into our cities who know very little about people and places, and plans are imposed from the top. Often it's a top down planning process. And our authorities and governments often, and most often, relate to those exclusive processes. For they do not wish to establish close relationship with people, nor include and reflect on people's needs, aspirations, and demands. Now, one way to challenge that, one way to turn it upside down, right, in order to intervene and bring about change, is really to use public spaces as an idea of planning. And public spaces are deeply entrenched into every neighborhood, people, and interest. It's your locality, it's your neighborhood, it's your region, then it's your nation, and then it's the world. It's a bottom up process. The neighborhood people know best about their place, right? Even small children, women, old people, young people, they can talk about their local area much, much more and better than any outsider can, right? With exceptions, that's a different matter. But obviously, they know their place the best. And therefore, if we have to effectively democratize planning, if we have to introduce a bottom up planning process in that effort to democratize planning, then we have to engage local people in the effort, in the planning effort. And the best way to do that is through the conception and the idea of public spaces. And therefore, I argue that public spaces is an effective instrument to operate a bottom up planning process. It's a driver, it's an engine that drives a democratic planning process inevitably. And therefore, that's what I am committed to. And I'm committed to talking about public spaces, engaging local people in that process of defining their neighborhood public spaces, and through that, also relating to the larger issues of public spaces across the city. And therefore, think about the city also at the same time, and not just get trapped into thinking of me, my house, my neighborhood, my street.
Yes,
So
makes
it's
sense.
also a stepping stone. It's an interesting stepping stone.
Yes, it makes sense. And yeah, when you use this phrase, re-envision our cities, you actually mean this bottom-up approach, right? You say that we have to re-envision our cities and we have to just
Yeah,
think. Yes, exactly. This is what you mean, the bottom-up approach,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. The larger driver is to rethink our city, to re envision our city, to think about a democratic city, to think about a city that is equal and just for all, and more particularly for the marginalized and the excluded people. And if that is the sole ultimate objective, then the public spaces movement enables us to re-envision our city. You know, it's a change that we want to bring about from the bottom.
Yes. Okay, so you claim that our struggle is against colonization. Give me some context to understand why you say that, even though in the back of my mind I know why, but I want you to help me understand.
Well, it's a very open question, and I'm sure everybody in every city across communities experience in their daily lives how more and more grounds are being taken away from under their feet, how open spaces, how common spaces, how matters of common interest are being privatized, how private agencies are increasing with the support of our democratically elected governments, are colonizing public assets for private profit. So public space is shrinking, public assets are shrinking, right? Cities are becoming more and more colonized, and we have to break that. We have to intervene to change that trend. This process of development of increased colonization of public assets and property and public spaces have to be brought to a stop. And hence I say that the struggle is truly against colonization, for democratization of our public property and assets and the city at large.
Yes. Okay, and now some questions regarding to your perception, more in depth. Okay, so I have seen you that you are actively engaged in film and documentaries around architecture and innovative ideas. So first of all, appreciation for that. And secondly, I want to ask you to share that how do you find it relatable to your personality and style as an architect and then as an activist?
Oh, well, firstly, thank you for appreciating that. But the point is that, we are all struggling. We are all struggling in order to achieve these ultimate objectives of the democratization of our cities and the nation and the world. Indeed, we are all struggling to democratize public assets and public spaces. If that is our endeavor, if that is our engagement, if that is our interest, then we have to devise ways by which we can popularize our ideas, right? Political leaders are popular, we say. Some of them are popular, some of them are not popular. Film stars are popular, many of them are popular. Eminent writers, eminent poets, they're all popular at a certain level. We as architects, who represent such a significant profession, significant because it's so important to social development, we have shied away from being popular or achieving popularity, right? We almost think popularity or trying to popularize our ideas is not our cup of tea, is not a part of our professional interest. That's for the political leaders, that's for the film stars, that's for the other people. That's where I differ. We need to, if we have to work with the public, interest matters, then we have to popularize our ideas. Not just my idea or our ideas as architects and planners, but ideas of the collective in which we work, the collectives in which we work, the communities in which we work. We need to campaign. We need to devise new ways through which we can effectively campaign and communicate, right? We often fail to communicate in public as professionals. We are experts in communicating in a closed room, in a conference room, through a PowerPoint presentation. We don't have the skills, and we do not speak the language that ordinary people or common people who have studied architecture can understand architecture and can understand the knowledge that we've learned, and that it can be communicated to many other people. So this particular idea of popularization have to be undoubtedly undertaken, particularly through public campaigns. And one of the ways of campaigning for popularizing our ideas is films, is documentaries. It's like poster campaigns that we are more familiar with. Okay, we often shy away from storytelling in public. We often shy away from, let's say, acting in public or speaking in public, or or you can say completely breaking down our skills of communication to new languages through which we can talk to the common people in the public, right? So that's been my effort. So we've had many poster campaigns, for example, in many neighborhood area development projects and programs. Uh, we made films in order to communicate effectively with slum dwellers on the questions of housing and the right to housing. And not just to communicate, but also through these medium of films, we conduct public dialogue. And conducting public dialogue is extremely important. So film is an effective means towards achieving or initiating or facilitating public dialogue. Public dialogue, which is again diminishing in that shrinking democratic space that I talked about right at the start. As democratic space is shrinking, our dialogues, our communication between each other, our talking to each other is shrinking. Now, here's a way that by which we not only challenge that trend of shrinking public spaces and trend of shrinking public dialogue, but reintroduce that. And so I tried to make a couple of films with my friends. I'm not alone a filmmaker. It's always a collaborative effort. And I think one of the things we learn through public work is the idea of collaboration. A collaborative effort and a cooperative endeavor, which is so fundamental to success in waging our struggles and achieving our rights. So these are some of the important lessons. And yeah, so I've made attempts. Some of them have been effective in communicating and initiating public dialogue. Some of them have not been, but it's always, as I said, a struggle.
Yes, it's is a very smart approach, and yes, indeed, your focus or and your objective of popularizing the idea, it's very innovative and it's very inspiring indeed. Great. Okay, so tell me about your experience of involving celebrities in your activism project, and how did you come up with this idea, and what were your backlash, and how did it facilitated you? Share your experience.
I think it this question sort of leads from the last question and
Yes, yes.
my explanation to the last question. In our effort towards popularizing our ideas and political endeavors and commitments, uh, drawing in popular figures and personalities, uh, like filmmaking, is yet another effort, is yet another way to way to popularizing our ideas. So you appeal to them, you explain to them. Some of them are interested, some of them too are committed to the ideas that we're talking about, that we would like to talk about. And since they are already committed to it, and they are eminent figures, they are popular figures, what better than them speaking in public about these ideas, about the ideas of equality and justice and of rights, about unification, against exclusion. So that's what we've done throughout in our struggles, whether it be for housing rights movement, be it for the public spaces movement, be it for the environment, or policy formulation. There have been many eminent personalities, film stars, writers, poets, lawyers, journalists who have joined, with whom we have joined and led this campaign.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that with me. It was a very interesting approach. Basically, thus I wanted to share it with the people. Okay, so you won the Jane
Thank
Jacob
you.
Award. Oh, yeah, you're welcome. You won the Jane Jacob Award. Tell me about that. How did it happen? What was it for?
Ha! Well, it was exciting indeed to be chosen from an international arena for the first International Jane Jacobs Medal. This was conferred on me in Quito uh, in 2016 during the UN Habitat Conference. Um, it was initiated, the award was launched by the Rockefeller Foundation. Um, yeah. And how did I get it? I don't know how I got it. But I believe the process was, which I was told later, that there were nominations from people from around the world, and they had received about 120 odd nominations from different parts of the world. And I was speaking in some international conference in Vancouver, where I got a message that I've been shortlisted amongst the first 10 or something like that. And that was was some breaking news for me because I had no clue that I had been nominated, because the nominations were not open. They were kept under wrap, and neither who nominated was disclosed. So when I got this news, it was exciting. But just to tell you the irony, in fact, I had nominated somebody else for the same award. And I was hoping that my nomination had got the award. But anyway, so I got back to Mumbai, and I then, somewhere in the middle of the night, got a message that I have been selected and have won the award. I think from the 10, they had shortlisted three, and I was in the three. And then finally, I was conferred with this award. It was a joint award. And yeah, so that was very exciting. And one of the conditions of the award was that I would have to travel to Quito to receive the award. And that was equally exciting, for I'd never been to Ecuador. And I was also planning, in any case, to attend the UN Habitat Conference. So, yeah, it was kind of a lot of excitement, and I was very happy. The award, or the medal, came with a cash award of 100,000 US dollars, which while accepting that, I donated that money to a trust which would carry out further research and study in our movements for public spaces, reclaiming public spaces movements, and for the struggle of the poor and the slum dwellers and their rights to housing, and on questions of urbanization, policy, etc. So yes, that fund is now being utilized for these purposes.
Awesome. Okay. Belonging to an Asian country, how do you describe the values of living together? Maybe this can help to more understand the concept of democracy and how to bring people together.
Yeah, this is so important that in many subcontinents, in some certain subcontinents like ours, that we have this culture of living together. And as I explained to you earlier, that our entire struggle is to bring people together. We are being separated through this huge industry of privatization, neoliberal globalization, which is constantly perpetuating the idea of individualization, of privatization, of exclusion, and so on and so forth, and exclusivity, and so on and so forth. So this whole growing trend of neoliberalization, the free market trend, and the free market policy and privatization have to be challenged if we have to restore our ideals of democracy and of community and of people as collectives, not as individuals. And if this is so, then yes, it's very important that it's very fortunate that it's already in our blood in many ways. I've been born in a family, in a community where we all shared, we learned to share right from our birth. We never hesitated. We never thought that my uncle's children were somebody else's children. That we all saw each other to be equal as children, as one of one family, of one community. And there was this incredible relationship between the families and the neighborhoods. So if there was a festival or there was a special day, it was not just contained or restricted to your house and to your family. Even as children, I remember walking with, pots of sweets across doors in the neighborhood to distribute and to share what we enjoyed that day. And we would be very happy to receive similar, goods and gifts, not gifts and goods as not market-oriented Valentine Day gifts, but sharing the little pleasures of food and custom and cultures and happiness of somebody's birthday or marriage or whatever it be, not just confined to families and houses, but to an entire neighborhood. And I think those were the values through which somebody like me grew up. And I'm sure you did that. I'm sure in our subcontinent we've learned that. And so it's such a fortunate value that we imbibe from our childhood, and we have to practice and expand that precisely in this otherwise very ugly political and social condition that is emerging through neoliberalization and privatization.
Yes, empathy is the key word which we learned from this whole growing up in this scenario. Okay, so share your thoughts about architecture, the depth you have reached about it till now.
Well, I've spoken quite a bit. There's nothing exclusive, there's no mantra. Uh, I'm still learning, grappling, struggling, and the only strength that I derive uh, that sustains me is working with communities and collectives. And that has provided me with um, all the energy that I need to intervene to bring about change, to understand better what I've learned as an architect, to relate my skills and knowledge as an architect with my neighborhood and my community and the city at large and the communities internationally at large. Yeah, so those are the lessons that I'm learning. I won't say I've learned completely. It's always an evolving and growing phenomenon, and at no point it is frozen or concluded. And so there is no specific prescription that I can provide as a mantra for success, except to say, engage, involve, participate, and popularize our thoughts in order to challenge this growing sense of alienation and exclusivity and separation.
Yes, and lastly, question that I would ask to sum up this conversation and to create the sense of urgency. Share some wisdom on climate change and urbanization, and what do you think the Asians of subcontinent must do?
Well, I'm happy you brought this question and I'd like to sort of quickly conclude on this point because this is yet another extremely important point. Till now, we've been talking about people. This takes us to talk about nature and the significance and the importance of nature and our respect to and our understanding of nature, our relationship with nature. As important is our relationship between each other and between people, it is important to talk about relationships with collectively with nature, not just as individuals, but people as collectives with nature. Climate change is already threatening us. Climate disaster is already dislocating people, hordes of people, lakhs and lakhs of people. Climate disasters are taking lives every year more than the COVID pandemic that we have experienced that has frightened and threatened us. So, if these are indeed important to check, then we have to draw our attention to climate change, to protection of our environment, to integrate the ideas of restoration, conservation of natural areas, and the protection of our environment for our own lives and for the life of nature. So I think this whole relationship, re-establishing a close relationship between people and nature, is the key point with which I would like to conclude. And it is an incredible architecture, placemaking, are incredible tools, instruments to intervene to bring about change. and in our struggle towards the achievement of these objectives of a sustainable environment and a better quality of life for all of us. Thank you.
Yes. So here I have the wrap-up questions that I ask everyone, which are deeply personal to you, and you can give the one-liner or briefly answer them. Okay. So what drives you, sir, and what keeps you focused on public spaces?
I think I've answered this in many
No, in
ways.
one line, like anything.
To build relationship with people
Great.
at
And what
large.
at large? Okay. What was your proudest moment of this working with people life?
The proudest moment has been when we, through collective effort, have reclaimed the waterfronts of Mumbai, as one example. The
Awesome.
entire seafronts through the western suburbs, over 7 kilometers.
Amazing. And what was your
Which
hardest
is
moment?
open, and true. Well, the hardest movement has been, of course, in our struggles for housing rights for the poor. Working in slums, working amongst the people who live in slums in Mumbai, who, as I said, constitute the majority people, who have been pushed to the margins, who live in filth, who have been denied civic rights and human rights. And in our struggle for housing rights, we've faced many difficult situations, including being arrested many times, with several charges on us, put into jail. Yet we are happy that we have every time won the battle. For people have participated and people's voices prevailed at the end of the day.
Great. And do you have any favorite placemaking mantra or the way you define placemaking that I support placemaking for this? Any quote or something?
Well, the mantra is really to build our relationships and our relationships collectively with nature. These relationships that are increasingly have been severed over the years. They have to be rebuilt. They have to be restored
Right.
to achieve sustainable cities for the future.
Right. Would you like to share your opinion about Pakistan or placemaking in Pakistan?
Well, I know very little about your country. I know so little, I would hesitate to speak only because I know so little. And I hope that what I said and what I related to you about my experiences and bits about Mumbai would help people in Pakistan to relate in the same manner to their own environment, to their own people, and draw ideas and make them appropriate and relevant in the local context in Pakistan. And that people of Pakistan and the people of India can relate to each other much more and much better than the present condition.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for sharing all the advices and your experience. Indeed. So, lastly, any message for global leaders out there?
Please do not separate us. We will hold our hands together and fight for each other and the nature and the environment. And we shall win.
Yes, we will. Thank you so much, sir, for today's episode. It was such an insightful and it was such a lovely talk. Thank you for your time. Take care, and I'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much, Azba. I'm happy that you're pursuing this
Thank
and
you.
trying to communicate this to our friends in Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your appreciation and for your time. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.